Welcome back. Today, we're talking to EY about how to use AI agents in audit. How do they divide tasks between people and tech? And how are they understanding and mitigating risk? Richard Harrison, EY's UK Digital Assurance Leader, is with me. After that, prediction markets. Never heard of them? Well, maybe it's time you did, because they're opening up a whole new market for insider traders. Tsang, ICAEW's Senior Financial Services Regulatory Manager, is here to tell us how they work, where the risks lie, and what needs to happen to minimise them. Welcome, Richard.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in. Now, EY is using AI agents, as I say. It's a big change. Before we get into the how, can you just remind us exactly what agentic AI is?
I think a lot of people, when they hear AI, the first thing they think of is sort of these chat interfaces where you can ask it a question, it comes back to you with an answer. So as we move towards agentic AI, rather than just answer a question, it can actually take an action on your behalf. So it has agency. So that could be as simple as drafting you an email, helping organise your calendar, or something more sophisticated like perhaps execute an audit procedure.
And this is a global rollout. You're not dipping your toe in. It's worldwide.
That is correct. So we are deploying AI agents within our core audit platform, which is called EY Canvas. It's a cloud-based platform. We deliver about 160,000 audits a year out of that platform. And we've started deploying agents specifically into that platform to everyone worldwide all at once.
It's a big, bold decision. Obviously, range of drivers behind it. But can you just outline for us what the main business case was for you?
We at EY, we have an absolute imperative to maintain, if not consistently improve audit quality. And if you consider the world which we are currently operating within, companies are getting increasingly complex. They're going cross-border, they're producing enormous amounts of data, and the level of audit effort is going up all the time. So what we're trying to do, or what we need to do, is use this technology to really help us innovate and create capacity to help us keep up with those growing demands. And then just outside of the core audit work we're doing at the moment, we know this technology is materially impacting the companies we work with. So making sure we're absolutely at the cutting edge of this allows us to give sharp insights and perspective on how to do this responsibly and how to do it safely.
Obviously, when you say you're using AI in audit, you are not using AI for all audit tasks. What are you using it for? What sort of things?
We've done this iteratively. So the first agents we deployed were helping us do things like help our auditors go research topics, so accounting standards, audit methodology. We then started to move towards using it for project management type activities, so inviting people into the file, allocating work, sending or drafting requests that we send off to the companies we audit. And now we've started moving into the next phase where we're starting using it to support us preparing audit work, but also reviewing audit work or helping us with our self-review.
Okay.
So to
and
bring
how does that work in practice?
Yeah, let me bring that to life. So if you're an audit professional and you're preparing your audit work, traditionally, and if I look back to when I was a graduate, you would finish your audit work and you sort of hand it off to your manager to review. And it'd be a bit like a school kid handing in their homework for a teacher to mark, right? And then you'd wait for the manager to come back with comments or things you might have missed, not thought about. And then you go back to the company you're working with and ask follow-up questions. So what our practitioners can now do in certain areas of the audit is they can run an AI agent which will go and review the work they have prepared, and we call that a self-review agent. And what that does is the preparer gets a first-line review from the AI technology to sort of help them identify things they might have missed. So they can then very quickly in real time get that work finalised. So when they do hand it in for marking to their manager, all that low-hanging fruit has been resolved. We still, of course, have that manager-level review, but by the time it gets to the manager, it's of a much higher standard. And what that's doing is it's improving the experience of our auditors, because they're more confident in the work they're handing to their manager. It improves the experience of the clients because they're not getting all those late follow-up questions. It's been getting dealt with in real time. And of course, it's helping with audit quality.
And less time wasting for the managers,
Absolutely,
as you say, on the low-hanging fruit, errors and omissions. So how fast does the technology turn around that first sift?
Minutes.
So completely different to the way it was
different.
Before.
It's fantastic.
Tell me about how you're introducing it into the teams in terms of the people themselves.
As you can imagine, this is a big global effort. So what we do before we roll it out, there's a lot of training involved. So because we're rolling out this at an enterprise level across the whole organisation, we have 130,000 people who we're training globally all at once. So we're training people how to use it. Some of the early things we did was train people on responsible AI usage frameworks. So talking about the importance of human in the loop, taking responsibility for the output that the technology generates. And that's all been really important at getting people used to the technology before we start deploying it at scale.
I mean, you must have done a huge amount of hearts and minds work with all your people globally. Enormous project in itself. How did people respond when you first told them this was going to happen?
There's been a lot of jaw dropping when they see the technology working for the first time. And what that generally then leads to is quite a lot of excitement in terms of what this means and, working for an organisation that are right at the frontier and cutting edge of this. And people's minds sort of very quickly start going to, okay, great. So does that mean I can move on to the more challenging, insightful, sort of sharp edge side of the profession? And does that mean my career is going to accelerate faster? And what does that mean for me in terms of like my progress as a professional?
So, must be some nervousness as well, though.
Certainly amongst the younger crowd. It's so in the mainstream and in the media.
Yeah.
And, you've got these like big celebrities, sort of CEOs running these organisations. I think everyone just really wants to be involved in this. And it's
further up the organisation where they haven't used AI, because obviously your graduate intake have been using it through university, so they're familiar with AI as a concept and as a tool. But further up, I'm guessing not.
Well, so you always get a level of scepticism with new technology, right? We've had a lot of this over the past years. We had people talking about blockchains. We had all these other things. We had NFTs. So people are used to a lot of technology hype that maybe sort of goes down a bit of a curve and doesn't quite deliver.
So quite a lot of conversations about that.
So you get sort of conversations with how quickly is this really going to happen? How quickly is this going to really move? But then when they see it appearing in the EY Canvas files and going live, very quickly people start to... the imagination comes wild and they're like, wow, this is real and this is moving quickly and this is actually really going to drive tangible change in the way we deliver audits.
People must have had reservations.
You get the occasional concern, what does this mean for me? What does it mean for my job going forward is the obvious question. And I think the answer is you go back to that increasing complexity in the profession and what we do and the opportunity that this creates for us to free up people's time to really do the part of the job that's enjoyable. So that's the challenging management on their key judgments. It's the really understanding the business. It's providing those sharp insights. And frankly, it's accelerating people's careers and getting to that point of the role that's really sort of interesting and exciting, not that administrative piece.
So you bring them with you by saying, okay, there's going to be less transactional stuff, less repetitive, dull stuff, more opportunity, and there will be training for you around the more engaging and challenging stuff as we go.
Exactly right. And we're training people to use this technology. So I talked about the sort of agentic AI we're deploying within our audit platform. But of course, we're also giving people desktop-based productivity AI technologies. So Microsoft Copilot is a well-known version of that. And we're training people to use that day to day to increase their own productivity. So we're giving them this unique combination of skills, AI, how to use AI themselves, how to build their own agents, but also showing them how to do it at an enterprise level at scale, safely and effectively. And I'm not sure there are many places you can get that experience at the moment. So in terms of getting training to be a professional for the future, it's a really great place to be.
Tell me about the clients. How did you manage that conversation?
So clients they're appreciative of us being able to come with a point of view as to how to really do this and to do it well at scale. So you talk about EY as client zero. I don't know if you've heard that phrase. But when we go talk to our clients, we talk about ourselves as client zero. So we're walking the walk here. We're not just talking the talk. And companies are really interested in how do you do that? How do you get to that level where you're ready to start deploying these things? And
how long did that take?
So it's been a journey. And there's been a lot of planning, as you can imagine. So we've sort of taken a three-pronged approach here. So you've got your technology platform everything sits in, which is Canvas. So we've had to make sure that's ready and it's connected to all the various different technology assets we use to deliver an audit. You've then got our methodology, which we've been focusing on streamlining that, making things more standardized, making them more... we introduced this concept of guided workflows, and that creates sort of an environment and a methodology that AI is better equipped to navigate. And then there's all that people training I talked about, that upfront, making sure people are comfortable with this technology. They know where the responsibility still sits with the user, the professional.
So start to now is how long? It can't be that long because people haven't even thinking about doing this for that long.
Yeah, I mean, a good couple of years.
So not an enormous amount of time.
Not an enormous amount of time. This technology is moving fast, right? And that's what's so interesting but also so exciting about it.
So how long did it take to get to the point where you looked at these AI agents and how they were functioning and you could confidently tell clients you were going to use them in real audit tasks and try and bring the clients with you on that?
So like I said, it's been very iterative. So you start with that project management stuff, the research stuff, and now we're introducing them one at a time to do very specific tasks. And by talking about that journey and how we've got there, we can build a lot of confidence in what we're doing. And you look at the impact it's having on our files and our quality scores, everything's tracking in a very positive direction. And I think the really exciting thing for me when we talk to the companies we audit about this is how we can start really using it to sharpen the insight and perspective we drive from the audit process. So I think clients are starting to feel like less of the conversation with the audit team is about sort of administrative stuff and following up on samples, and it's more about focusing on things we're challenging on, perspectives we've got, things we've observed, sometimes more challenging, potentially uncomfortable conversations, but more intellectually interesting conversations.
So what sort of questions did clients have for you? They must have had a lot.
So we get the questions about the building blocks to get there.
Yeah.
Because of course you do. You get the questions around security and safety and, how are we governing this? They sort of read horror stories in the press and they have questions around, well, how are you mitigating against that? You get the obvious questions around how are you sourcing the technology? Where's it coming from? How are you building it? So just a whole raft of questions as people explore all of this. We get a lot of technical questions.
Yeah, because as you say, risk, it's all over the media. You can't really talk about this without talking about the perception of risk, indeed the actuality of it. I think it was last week, wasn't it? We saw the monitoring organisation Meta and their report about AI performance across the piece. And, honestly, it did make you sit up, even in a media world where there's a lot of talk about risk, because it was 44 examples of AIs overstepping the mark just between February and March this year. The thing that kind of leaped to my eye was agents routinely attempted to cheat on our hardest evaluation tasks, often in flagrant and elaborate ways that we believe humans wouldn't consider. So there's a kind of, I don't want to use the word deviousness, but a level of imagination that I think it surprised them how their agents were responding. Tell me, obviously you've thought about this a lot.
Yep.
It's all going to be about anticipating and mitigating those risks. How do you do that? Is it all about human oversight?
Human oversight is a massive part of it, but maybe if I build towards that.
Yeah.
So I think there could be a common misconception here that these AI systems consistently operate with unlimited freedom. And that is not how we have designed these. So our agents are focused on very specific tasks and they operate within very clearly defined boundaries. So they only have access to specific information and tools that are relevant to the task they've been designated. So have you ever heard the term atomic AI?
Explain it for us.
So this is, rather than having an AI agent that is all powerful and can do all things. So in theory, you could create an AI agent with a chat interface, stick it in our file and give it access to everything. Please complete the audit for me.
Yeah.
And it would operate with a huge level of unpredictability because it would navigate how to do that and it'd be very difficult to test, govern and deploy.
Traceability would be really hard.
Incredibly difficult. So we design very specific agents for specific tasks. They go through a very careful governance and testing process. We call it certification. We've got a responsible framework around AI that sits around that. There are 9 core principles. If anyone's interested, you could Google them. EY's 9 principles of responsible AI. And what that allows us to do is make sure that they are very focused on specific tasks. And then you build sort of an orchestrator that sits over the top to get the right agent to do the right thing at the right time.
So transparent, step-by-step process for everything.
Yep.
And the data, the training data?
It's interesting you use the word training. It's a very human word, isn't it? Like
I think it's how everyone thinks of it, isn't it? What does this AI agent know? We've trained it on such and such data. So, tell us how you would think of it.
We're not training large language models. We're using pre-existing large language models and we're putting instruction frameworks and guardrails around them. And we're giving them very specific remits to do very specific tasks. So this is a lot more about how you create that operating framework around the agent than actually training it itself.
Okay. And tell me about people, because I don't want to get into the conversation about, are you losing people to do this? We've talked about that on the podcast before. Obviously, we all understand there's going to be stuff around that in due course for the whole sector. But how do people fit into this process in terms of the checking? Are you literally run everything side by side? I'm imagining you kind of have to, don't you, in the early days?
So this is where AI user experience design becomes really interesting and important. Unfortunately, I've got much smarter people than myself who can help us navigate that. So if you think about an auditor using AI in audit. The auditor, as we say, needs to be ultimately responsible for its output.
Yeah.
So it needs to understand the auditor.
Yeah, the person.
Yes, the human being needs to understand what the AI is doing each steps of the way. So that's about creating transparent user interfaces.
Yeah, so they understand what they're seeing.
You can understand what it's doing, when it's doing, step by step. A good example might be if you were creating an AI to do a financial statement tie-out, so making sure the accounts cast, everything ties out. You could write quite a clever prompt that would come back and say what doesn't work, but it wouldn't necessarily visually show you everything it had checked that does work. So how would you know if it's missed something? So you then get into this user design point around transparency to allow the user, the auditor, to ultimately validate what the AI has done effectively. So what we're trying to do is get people to move smarter and faster using the AI, not delegate responsibility to it.
But it sounds like a very people-heavy process still, because
Absolutely.
It kind of has to be.
Yeah, people are absolutely at the centre of everything we do in terms of our audits.
Going forward, how do you see that evolving?
I can't see our people not ultimately being responsible for this in the foreseeable future.
Well, the regulatory environment demands it now, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You can't delegate authority to an artificial intelligence, and I don't think you'd want to. This is again about how do we make it so the administrative side of what we do is accelerated so we can then focus on where we can add real value and perspective and sharpen our insights. There are examples already where AI can go help us very quickly research market trends or changes in legislation or unusual anomalies in the data that's in front of us that we're auditing.
Really good for that.
Really good for that. So if we can get our auditors out of the weeds, the AI doing sort of the transactional routine work, still in a transparent way where the auditor can go in and review and validate what it's done, but getting everyone focused on the sort of the more challenging, interesting areas, I think that's going to really elevate audit quality. It's going to improve the experience of our people, and it's going to give a lot more value out of the audit process. And then what we haven't touched on is, of course, as companies start moving towards using this, we're going to need to come in and think about, well, how do we get comfortable companies' AI is doing what they think it's doing? How do we audit the AI's output? So there's going to be a new focus and need to focus on sort of AI assurance. And to free up the capacity to do that, we've got to get that first bit right.
So how long has it been since you actually got this up and running in the real world?
It all moves so fast. You've got to look back and think it's happening quickly, as you say. So we rolled out the first agents in our audit files last year in the autumn.
Okay.
And that was the research agent. So that was the, go help me understand technical accounting, go understand audit methodology. And then in the spring of this year, we started moving towards those sort of project management administrative agents. And then throughout the summer, that's when we started releasing the agents that can do the drafting of or helping us draft audit work, and those review agents I talked about.
I mean, it's unprecedentedly rapid, huge change, isn't it?
It is, but it's very controlled, as I say, because it's one agent at a time or groups of agents. It's very specific and deliberate. We're not releasing agents that can cover the entire audit file. It's at the moment, it's very specific tasks, very specific areas. And then the plan is, as we get people used to that, we keep those feedback loops. We learn from user experience, user design, how to make it effective. The goal is by 2028 to have most areas of the audit having AI agents supporting us in at least some way.
So as you say, it's iterative. You're presumably tweaking and learning all the time. Big lessons learned so far? Anything unexpected?
The big lesson so far is the value of having conversations outside of your immediate ecosystem or bubble on this stuff. We're doing really well with this, but we're doing that by having lots of conversations with other parties about it. So be that our regulators and taking them for the journey with us, be it the companies we work with, or just even other areas of the business. I sit in assurance, really interesting hearing what our consulting colleagues are using it for, because we're all adapting and learning to use this technology at once. And you might have seen in the press that Microsoft and Harvard have identified us one of the 14 leading frontier firms in terms of this. And that gives us a fantastic cohort to work with and sort of ideate and understand what else is going on in the world. So I think that sharing ideas and talking to others is a huge learning.
Puts you right in the spotlight there, doesn't it, as well?
It does. But I think it's a good spotlight to be in. It's really exciting. Everyone wants to be on the frontier of this. And frankly, if I was a young professional coming into the industry, I think this is exactly where I'd want to be.
Now, on to prediction markets. Podcast regular Polly Tsang is back with us. Hi, Polly.
Hi, Philippa.
Now, look, I am betting most people have never heard of prediction markets. We're going to get into why they might matter. But first, what exactly are they?
Should we take a step back? So insider trading. What are we talking about? Insider trading. So it's probably isn't something you associate with the next James Bond, when a CEO retires, or when iPhone might release a foldable iPhone. Because insider trading in the past has always been about shares, about insider financial information.
People in the city.
People in the city who can drive the movement of shares going up or down. But prediction markets is going to change all that. Suddenly, all this information that may just be confidential right now, but can now be monetized, right? Because what prediction markets are essentially is, imagine FTSE. But instead of trading shares, you're trading probability of events happening.
Celebrity gossip.
Potentially celebrity gossip. So let's stick with, Bank of England. Will it cut interest rates next month? Taylor Swift is the first child arriving imminently. But suddenly it all becomes monetizable information. Now, first you might think, oh, this is just a bit of harmless fun, you know, betting on, is Idris Elba going to be the next James Bond, right? But actually, as a company, the reason why, as a board member, anyone in charge of corporate governance needs to take heed is because suddenly confidential information become monetizable, and insider trading remit potentially can become much, much bigger.
So this is messy, isn't it? Because when is insider trading insider trading? Because within the definition of legislation and regulatory frameworks, I'm guessing there's quite a specific definition of how that is and what that is. Financial data that only you have access to. I don't know how it works, Polly, tell us. But if I'm betting on Taylor Swift having a baby or not, that's not insider trading. So why do we have a problem?
Well, not right now. But, it is a very interesting question, which actually, where does it fall within? That's very unclear. As in, if you're trading information on these markets, under what laws does it fall within? So in the UK, they're still clarifying the regulatory perimeter. Currently, if it's financial, potentially under the FCA. If it's not, under the Gambling Commission. But the FCA has already said that this is an area the perimeter needs to be examined and clarified. But stepping aside, even without the regulations, this is something that companies need to address now because the risk exists.
There's two platforms, right?
Yes. So Kalshi and Polymarkets are the two main platforms. And actually, they've both exploded the last year. We're talking quadrupled, okay? So in part because of the World Cup, because a lot of people have been placing bets on it. Some analysts estimate that annual volumes will reach $1 trillion by the end of 2030. That's we're no longer talking about niche websites. We're talking about lots of people placing bets on uncertainty, right? So it's not something we can ignore. Now, an interesting tidbit is actually, you might imagine thousands of people kind of making small bets.
Yeah.
But Wall Street Journal analysis have found that actually 67% of the profits have just gone to 0.1% of accounts, which kind of raises the question, right? Are these really good traders, or are people trading on information that other people might not have? And I think the recent case of Google has really, really kind of pinpointed the issues that we're facing. So for those that don't know, in May, the US authorities charged a Google employee with using material, non-public information to trade on Polymarket contracts relating to Google's year-in search ratings. And it's quite funny when you hear about it, because this employee, under the handle of Alpha Raccoon, earned around $1.2 million, allegedly, by correctly predicting 22 out of the 23 Google's most popular searches before those rankings were publicly released. Now, it sounds funny, but this, importantly, I think people need to remember, this wasn't about earnings, right? It wasn't about a takeover. It wasn't even about Google's share price. It was just confidential internal information that happened to have value because prediction markets existed, right?
But how did that come to light? Do we know? Because I'm wondering, how would anyone know if anyone was placing bets on financial confidential information?
That's a really good question, because some people, especially the founders of some of these trading arenas, They argue that, and I see their point, they argue that actually it's a lot easier, it's a lot more auditable when you commit, say, insider trading on these platforms. Because you can see exactly who made the trade, when they made the trade, and what events happened afterwards. So arguably, say, for example, Polymarket uses crypto to place trades. You still need to trace because it's anonymous, right? But really, there's a very clear auditable trail. So arguably, some types of misconduct may become easier to spot. But I think the wider question here is you're no longer talking about insider, like financial information, right? I can give you 3 really good examples to demonstrate how this might affect a company. It doesn't even have to be in financial services. So the first one, let's start with a bit lighter. So Nick's James Bond. Everybody's wondering, right? I mean, I'm sure you have an idea.
Absolutely.
I'm backing a few people. But imagine you're in the room where they're casting the new James Bond, okay? You know who the new James Bond is. The lawyers acting for the actor might know who, actress? Probably actor. Will know who Nick's James Bond is. Potentially some of the marketing people might know. And they're not going to release this information until next month. But suddenly, like by you knowing it, it's no longer a bit of gossip. That's monetizable on the prediction markets, right? You can now go place a bet and say like, yeah, I know who the next James Bond is and potentially make a lot of money. Is there an issue with that? Question mark. But if we like move that a little bit further, say you told your cousin that, again, Idris Elba is going to be the next James Bond, and your cousin places a bet in Polymarket on that. Like, is that still insider trading or is that just... like, where do you draw the line? So that's the first example. Now, let's bring that example from Hollywood back to the boardroom, right? Prediction markets say, okay, company X's CEO will resign by the end of the year, okay? So you maybe, the chair knows, the board knows, maybe HR knows because maybe there's succession planning in place, but the market doesn't know. And technically, like, that's just confidential information. It's not to do with the earnings. However, that is now monetizable. And I think the final example I'll use to kind of like bring this home is, say you're deploying an AI product, right? But your engineering team has told you, okay, there's going to be a 6-week delay. So your engineers know, your supply chain might know, your market team might know. But again, if you know it, you can suddenly put that into Polymarket and go, hey, actually, I'm going to bet like this fantastic new, I don't know, OpenAI's new model is going to be delayed by 6 weeks. But the counter to that also is there's an element of corporate risk in terms of corporate espionage risk.
Yeah.
Because if someone's betting that, and if somebody's looking at the market and they can see, oh, somebody's placed a very well-timed bet saying that there's going to be a delay, suddenly things that you think are confidential are not. And your competitors will know that. So there's that element as well to consider.
It's interesting, this, isn't it? Because this is accessible to everyone. Back in the day, insider trading, you kind of had to be working in that sector. It was about finance in the city. You had to know a guy or a gal, and that's where you got your information from. This is totally different. This is any organisation with any form of information that isn't known, that might perhaps move a market or help your rival. Or so now we've laid out this potential nightmare. How should businesses respond to this?
Well, I think before we get to that, I think there's also an added twist where it's not just insider information. Now people have the ability to manipulate the market as well using this. So I'll give you an example. Your CFO is about to do an earnings call tomorrow. You're writing the speech. You want to put pineapple in that speech, okay? You want to make the CFO say pineapple, okay? And then you place a bet in one of these markets saying CFO of X company is going to say pineapple, you make lots of money. As a speechwriter, you control that. So you can actually manipulate the market.
So you create the outcome.
You create the outcome. So it's not just, oh, I have insider information, but you have the ability to modify that. Now, back to your question. As a company, what do? You do not wait for the regulations to come because the risk exists now, right? So if you're doing corporate governance, you need to act now. So I'm going to say 5 points. First one is awareness. Just making sure that the board and executives in your company are aware that these markets exist because many organizations simply hasn't considered it. Second, update your policies. Don't just review insider dealing and conduct policies. You can't just refer to securities trading anymore, right? Consider if any of these policies need to cover prediction markets and any of these event contracts. The third one is update your codes of conduct, because this isn't just a legal issue. It's almost an ethical issue in a way. So making employees understand that confidential information may have value, even if it doesn't relate directly to the company's share price, and bringing the ethical perspective to that. The fourth is training. And again, that goes back to awareness, but particularly for people who might be involved in areas where these information can be monetizable. So if your executives, HR, communications, product teams, and people involved in major announcements. And the last one is just monitor developments, because this is an area that is developing very, very quickly. And actually, financial institutions have already started implementing policies around it. For example, Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley's have both updated their policies. So people are looking at this, but I think people outside of financial institutions need to look at this a lot more.
Do we know how Goldman have dealt with it in policy terms? Have they banned people from using the platforms outright, or is it a less defined prohibition?
Yeah, you're absolutely alluding to the right thing. It's like, because it's so wide, how do you do it? So my understanding is some financial institutions have outright banned their employees from using prediction markets. However, there's a question, personal liberties.
Yeah.
And also, I think you made a really good point that this parallels very well to what companies were trying to do when social media first came into play.
Oh, yes. Do you ban all your employees? I mean, some tried, didn't they? And that really went badly.
Yeah. So it's a really new area. But
social media kind of fell back on the don't do anything stupid, be ethical sort of policies, didn't they? I think the policies shrank from 5 pages to a short paragraph in relatively short space of time, didn't they? To kind of what worked, that sense of relying on your employees to understand the risk and do the smart thing. And this sounds like it might have to be the same.
I completely agree, Philippa. I think that's probably, right now anyways, probably a sensible approach before any set regulations, but also because of the massive remit you're looking at as potential monetizable confidential information.
You mentioned regulation. Regulators are looking at this, I'm guessing.
I don't actually know how closely they're looking at this at the moment. I did see it on their radar as an area of clarification, because it's very difficult, right? Okay, FCA's remit, financial information, but we're talking much, much, much wider than that. If you're betting on things like, is the CEO going to wear a red tie at the Knicks?
Yeah.
That's not financial information. So who's going to cover it?
And it's not really gambling commission either, is it?
Well,
or is it?
We don't know. We don't know. It could be. But even if Gambling Commission's remit is this, I don't think currently they would cover the aspect where I mentioned where you're making the market yourself.
Yeah.
That whole point about pineapple, when you're manipulating the market. I'm not sure what covers that aspect in the UK with non-financial information. So it remains to be seen. But there's definitely something that corporate governance teams can be doing right now, even in lieu of the regulations.
Yeah, and from what you've been saying, should be doing, at least having the conversation about it.
Absolutely should be doing, because the question for boards now is not just, how can we deal with financial information insider trading? It's like, what confidential information do we have that could potentially be monetizable? It's a much bigger question.
Really interesting. Thanks, Polly.
Thank you.
That is it for this episode. Check out the links around the subjects we've covered today when you go to the show notes to log your listen as CPD. Don't forget to do that. Next time on the podcast, what if Russia invaded Poland? We're taking a hypothetical look at what an expansion of the Ukraine war could mean for British businesses and how they can plan now to combat those risks. If you have feedback or ideas for the podcast team, please do share them with us. Here's the email address, podcasts@icaew.com. Meanwhile, if you can find a moment to rate the series on your app, we would be very grateful. Every rating helps us reach new listeners. Thanks for being with us.